My name is Gord Peters. I'm the Deputy Grand Chief at the Association of Iroquois and Allied Indians, and my main focus here is to work on inherent rights treaties and the developmental processes around that for our communities, and work vis-a-vis with the governments to be able to try to move those forward in a positive and constructive manner. There's a lot of talk about what jurisdiction is today, and most of the time people can only understand jurisdiction in the context of European views and Western ideologies around jurisdiction. Jurisdiction today for a lot of people just means lands and boundaries, and it means your ability to make laws and control within those laws. But for us, jurisdiction comes from somewhere else. Our jurisdiction comes from our belief in our creation stories. It comes from our ceremonies, and it starts to begin to talk about what responsibilities that we have, and responsibilities for the lands, the waters, the animals, the birds. And in those responsibilities, we have a never-ending responsibility to look after those areas. We believe that the Creator put us on these lands, and when we are put on these lands, we have assumed that responsibility, which today in English all we can call is jurisdiction. There's a lot of debate about that, and for many people, because mostly they don't know our historical processes, they don't know the international treaty processes that we've entered into with other nations like Great Britain, and because of the colonization that's taken place for the last 160, 70 years, it's fundamental that people believe that somehow or other that we have joined in confederation. We ask this question all the time of governments: is when did we as Indigenous nations join confederation? What did we get from joining confederation, so that we will be able to determine what our place is? That has never happened. We are still outside the realm of being members of the state of Canada, and we continue to push hard on the educational front, so that people will understand what happens to us. We don't want to be beggars in our own lands. We want to be able to share the bounty that comes with our territories. We want to be able to make sure that we have adequate lands for our communities. All those are part of our responsibilities when we start looking after this world in this place known as Turtle Island. First Nations already occupy the field. They just don't understand that they are in control of that process. So let me take you back to a UN treaty study that was done maybe 20 years ago, 25 years ago. One of the fundamental components of the treaty study says that there has to be unassailable proof that Indigenous people give consent to give up their lands, resources, their jurisdictions, their treaties, all of those kinds of things. And it's clear that we have never given our consent to do those things. So our jurisdiction still exists. Our sovereign jurisdiction still exists. It's been dormant because Canada has tried to build on top of it, but Canada tries to be able to tell the Canadian public two fundamental things. One, that we just got here earlier than Canadians, we came across the Bering Strait, and two, that treaties extinguished all of our jurisdiction. None of those are true. Those are falsehoods that have been promoted to allow Canada to try to take control of our lands and resources so that there's no question. It's called certainty. Canada wants absolute certainty that Indigenous people will never be in the way when they extract resources. Yes, there is a separation process that already exists because of the international treaty. And so it wouldn't make any sense for us to be able to have our laws like the C-92, which was currently passed by the federal government on child and family relations. Would it make any sense for us to have our laws turned into Canadian federal laws or Canadian constitutional laws? Because the processes that are there are inconsistent with the treaty arrangement. Nations don't make legislation for other nations. And so in order for us to be able to continue to build our world, we need to start talking about what we're going to do in our areas. Governance is a huge issue that we need to begin to address. We need to figure out how we're going to get people to be able to express their consent, because that consent lies with our people. And we have to be able to figure out how we're going to work with people so that we can bring them from that state of the interaction of the colonial processes to where they embrace our culture, our languages, and our spirituality. Well, sovereignty is basically a European word, and so is jurisdiction. And they both come to us vis-a-vis the state of Canada and their processes that they try to impose on us. Our terminology is responsibility. And our responsibility is fairly extensive, and it's amazing that we have exercised that responsibility for thousands of years before any Europeans landed on this shore. And so when they introduced these concepts to us, like sovereignty and jurisdiction, it means that they want us to become absorbed in their political realms, into the polity of Canada. And when we get absorbed in those processes, it means that any laws that they want to pass regarding us, regarding our lands, regarding our children and families, that they can pass those, and we have no mechanism whatsoever to be able to prevent that from being able to happen, other than for us to be able to use our own civil disobedience to be able to do that. And so we need to get control of our terminology, understand our terminology, so that we're in a discussion, in a debate with anyone, our terminology can be expressed clearly. I believe it starts from a fundamental process of understanding, first of all, our own creation stories, extracting from those creation stories those stories that are relevant for us today about how we want to be able to look after ourselves and govern our communities. And then we need to talk about how we're going to deal with our ceremonies. Many of our people, the governance process comes out of that, because in our world, we don't separate the state part of our world, the political part of our world, from our spirituality. They're one and the same, and we have to be able to maintain that so that we can continue going forward. It starts with a debate and a discussion about where we want to be and how we want to be able to get there. But there are practical models right now that people are sharing and developing. There are existing governments like the Haudenosaunee out there that still have their models of governance that predate any contact with any Europeans. And so we have the basis to be able to learn from each other, and that's the strength that we have always about sharing with each other, so that we can create those things that we need to rebuild our world. Well, you know what? We started this discussion, and we've probably been in this discussion for quite some time. Back in the mid-90s, we started what we called the nation building process, and it was about governance in our communities and working with our people to recover our people from the onslaught of colonization, residential schools, the 60 scoops, and all of those things that are there. At our recent conference, to jump ahead a few years, the first thing that we did was we set out a process for people to begin to start talking about a plan. What did they want to do? And it's really important for us to be able to begin to plan. Some people believe that we never used to plan as Indigenous people, but we were tremendous planners. And we carried out those plans with great success. And so planning becomes the ultimate part of what we need to be able to do. With that planning process, you can be able to begin to start talking to community members. And there's a general view that we need to establish consensus in the communities. I'm a fundamental believer that you start with a small group of people, and you start to be able to work, and you start to figure out what you can do and how you can move things forward. And then you set out your vision and the way you want to be able to communicate to other people. That's what brings other people to you when they see good things happening. And so that's, I think, the best way for our communities to proceed. Well, the easiest thing you can do is you can contact the Association of Iroquois and Allied Indians. If you want to make personal contact, I have a cell number I'm going to provide to you. It's 519-317-9420. And I think generally we have so much ability to communicate these days. There's no reason why we can't share the ideas that we have and work together to be able to build a better future for our peoples.